Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. It should come as no surprise that abortion and contraception are from hell. But something almost no one knows is the demonic presence testified to by one of the world's leading contraception proponents back in the earliest days of the movement. Marie Stopes was to England what Margaret Sanger was to the United States, a woman crazed over making birth control accepted and welcomed owing to their racist passions. Sanger is responsible for Planned Parenthood, which kills 3.8 million children through abortion worldwide every year. Stopes is largely responsible for Marie Stopes International, which kills 3.1 million children through abortion worldwide every year. The two met at a conference in England in 1915. Stopes was a respected academic, the first woman professor at the University of Manchester. But around 1910, when she was 30 years old, she became enthralled with eugenics and wanted to reduce the number of undesirables in the society. She began petitioning various leaders in England, most of whom gave her the cold shoulder despite her high academic credentials. In 1917, she published a book, Married Love, promoting birth control, which was so widely popular it went through 5 printings in the first year alone. Still, the ruling class was not impressed, most especially the leaders of the Church of England, who, in 1920, were gathering for their scheduled every 10th year meeting at Lambeth Palace. Shortly before the meeting, Stopes herself relays that a voice spoke to her while she was sitting in the shade of a yew tree in her backyard. The voice, she claimed, was the voice of God, telling her to relay to the bishops that they were to change the teaching on birth control. She dashed into the house and dictated to her secretary, quote, "My lords, I speak to you in the name of God. You are his priests, I am his prophet," closed quote. And so began a work which she eventually entitled A New Gospel to All Peoples, a Revelation of God, uniting physiology and the religions of man. It was completed by the summer and a copy sent to each of the 267 bishops at the Lambeth Conference. In her work, she contradicted St. Paul, saying his message was 1900 years old and could now be ignored, and added, "God spoke to me today." She claimed God told her sexual union was not for procreation, but for pleasure, that couples should use the best means of birth control, quote, "placed at man's service by science," end quote. Stopes' vision or voice was certainly not from God, obviously, but she never denied or recanted the account. She heard a voice directing her what to do. She insisted that a supernatural voice, which she claimed again was God, had given her instructions to spread birth control throughout the country and eventually the world. She told the English bishops in the letter to them that the voice had said that the bishops must teach their flocks that, quote, "the pure and holy sacrament of marriage may no longer be debased and befouled by the archaic ignorance of the centuries," closed quote. Sexual union was for pleasure, not procreation. At Lambeth in 1920, despite the first shiftings of public opinion, the Church of England leaders rejected Stopes' vision and voices. Undeterred, Stopes published her, quote, "New Gospel" for the masses in 1922. It cost her dearly among her academic atheist university peers who lost all respect for her for claiming divine visions. A year before publishing the New Gospel, she opened England's first birth control clinic, but shortly thereafter moved it to this location on Whitfield Street near Tottenham Court Road, which Church Militant shot video of during a trip to London while we were there giving a talk. This site still remains an active birth control clinic as well as abortion counseling center. Like this central London clinic, Margaret Sanger had launched her country's first clinic in Brooklyn 5 years earlier in 1916, making this year, 2016, a kind of 100th anniversary of the birth control movement becoming public. Both women detested the Catholic Church and made no bones about it, saying so publicly. In 1942, Stopes remarked in writing that Catholics, quote, were a curse or something worse. So when we sit back for a moment and consider that from these two women's actions, what they set in motion, 7 million children are killed worldwide every year. They both hated the Catholic Church, and one of them was inspired to greater zeal in her evil efforts by a supernatural voice that she says directed her to spread the message that sex is about pleasure and not procreation. Shortly before she heard the demonic voice, Stopes sent a copy of her book, Married Love, to Queen Mary with an accompanying note about the book saying that it was written, quote, in the interest primarily of your subjects, the British, but ultimately for the whole of humanity, close quote. I bet it was. Very shortly after that, she opened her birth control clinic, kept publishing articles in papers, writing more books, making inroads with political and religious leaders wherever she could. She carried on intensely for the next 10 years until the next Lambeth Conference gathering in the Church of England leaders in 1930. This time, however, the Church of England, for the first time in Christian history, approved of birth control, a decision arrived at in large part by the zeal of a woman spurred on by the voice of a demon. God love you and keep you. I'm Michael Voris.